The day I first stepped through the rusted front gates of Jefferson High, the August sun blazed down on the cracked concrete like a merciless spotlight. The heat shimmered off the faded brick walls of the old building, warping the reflection of my own cautious silhouette in the windows as if to warn me, this place is not what it seems. But I had already made my choice long before setting foot on this campus. My pencil skirt, perfectly pressed that morning, hugged my waist with meticulous precision. My white blouse was crisp, starched within an inch of its life. My blonde hair, pulled into a conservative bun, sat like a helmet of control atop my head. Every inch of my appearance had been calculated not for vanity, but for armor. Professionalism would be my first line of defense. The leather satchel slung over my shoulder felt heavier than usual, and not just because it carried more than lesson plans and red pens. I was 28 years old and younger than most of the burned-out teachers who shuffled through these halls counting the days until retirement. My degree from the University of Chicago could have secured me jobs at pristine suburban schools, where PTA meetings were civil and Christmas brought Starbucks gift cards from grateful parents. But I hadn't come here for comfort or accolades. I came here for something much more personal. I came here for survival. 17 days earlier, I'd signed my contract with Jefferson High's principal, Mr. Washington, a weary man whose receding hairline and darting eyes told me everything I needed to know about the world I was stepping into. "Different rules here, Miss Matthews," he warned me, trying to soften the realities of this inner-city war zone. "You want to survive? Pick your battles." I had nodded politely, but inside, my mind was steeled. "I already picked my battle, sir." Because Jefferson High was not just a job for me, it was my fortress. My fresh start after years spent enduring what no one should have to endure. What Washington didn't know, what no one here knew, was that I'd escaped my previous life only 6 months ago, when my restraining order against my ex finally expired. Brandon had been a police officer, which made leaving him not only terrifying but dangerous. The legal system had not been on my side, but Krav Maga had been. 3 years of training had turned my body into a weapon and my mind into a fortress. My concealed Glock 43, which remained locked safely at home, and the taser in my purse weren't signs of paranoia, they were my insurance policies. I had survived the storm. Now I intended to build a life beyond it. The first 2 weeks at Jefferson High had been rough, but manageable. I laid down my classroom rules with a firm, fair hand, refusing to be either the tyrant or the pushover. I ignored the whispered comments about my appearance from students and the patronizing remarks from certain male colleagues, men who believed a young woman like me wouldn't last long among these kids. But slowly, I began to reach some of the students, especially the girls, who recognized something familiar in my unwillingness to be intimidated, in my refusal to shrink. But then there was Marcus King. Marcus King was 17 and stood 6'3". His broad frame and linebacker build would have made him a football star if not for the drug charges that got him expelled from the team. His father owned several check-cashing businesses and liquor stores across the city, enough legitimate enterprise to mask the family's darker affiliations. Here at Jefferson High, Marcus was royalty. The teachers looked away when he showed up late or harassed other students. He moved through the hallways like he owned them, and in many ways, he did. His crew was smaller than in previous years. Only Diego, Vega, and Jamal Foster remained at his side after Tony was locked up and Ray Sean was sent to alternative school. But the power dynamic remained potent. Diego's brother ran with the Latin Kings, providing protection both inside and outside school walls. Jamal's mother was a city councilwoman who had already pulled strings to make his 2 assault charges disappear. In this world, political connections were often more valuable than money itself, and Marcus knew how to wield power. I made my first mistake on day 3. It was a simple thing. I refused to let Marcus enter my classroom 15 minutes late without a hall pass. "I don't need a pass," he said, his voice low, calm, the sound of someone unaccustomed to hearing the word no. "Then you don't need to be in my class," I replied, my hand steady on the door handle, even as my heart pounded like a war drum beneath my ribs. The entire classroom fell silent. 28 pairs of eyes watched as I faced down the king of Jefferson High. The smirk that slid across Marcus's face chilled me. It wasn't the cocky grin of a boy caught breaking rules. It was the cold, deliberate smile of a predator recognizing prey. "You're new here," he said softly, "so I'll give you one chance to open that door. The only chance you're getting is to make it to your next class on time." I closed the door. The click of the latch was loud, final, like the starting gun to a war I hadn't fully realized I'd entered. The whispers started immediately. She's dead. She don't know who she messing with. Marcus gonna eat her alive. But I returned to my lesson, forcing my trembling hand to continue writing on the whiteboard. The following days became a campaign of calculated psychological warfare. First, my tires were slashed in the faculty parking lot. The security cameras conveniently malfunctioned that morning. Then came the vulgar graffiti on my classroom whiteboard. After that, the casual accidental brushes from male students in the hallway, their hands lingering just long enough to make their intentions unmistakable. I documented every incident, filed reports with Principal Washington, but each time, I was met with that same tired sigh and lowered eyes. "Kids will be kids," Washington said. "Try building rapport with them." Marcus responds well to respect. "Respect is earned," I replied. "And I don't negotiate with terrorists, even teenage ones." But Washington had perfected the art of survival in this environment. To him, seeing nothing was safer than seeing too much. "This isn't the suburbs, Miss Matthews. Different rules here." The truth was, I understood fear. I understood survival. I had lived through worse. I'd once been outmatched, overpowered by a man twice my size, shielded by his badge, and protected by a system designed to doubt women like me. I knew what it meant to be trapped emotionally, physically, legally. I had escaped him. I would not let Marcus King become my next captor. That morning, when I discovered my classroom door ajar and my desk rifled through, the warning signs were unmistakable. The energy in the hallways was tense, whispers trailing behind me like ghostly shadows. The students scattered at my approach, like animals sensing a coming storm. During third period, while discussing To Kill a Mockingbird, I caught sight of Marcus through the window, standing outside, watching. Diego and Jamal flanked him like sentinels. His stare was predatory, unwavering. One of my brightest students, Destiny Williams, noticed my discomfort. "You okay, Miss Matthews?" I forced my voice into a steady register. "I'm fine, Destiny. Now who can tell me why Atticus chose to defend Tom Robinson, despite knowing he would lose?" But I wasn't fine. My hand kept drifting to my purse, where my taser, pepper spray, and personal alarm sat ready, my armor in miniature. I had promised myself I wouldn't need these things here. That teaching would be healing, normal. But normal was a luxury I no longer trusted. At lunch, the atmosphere shifted again. Teachers averted their eyes when I entered the lounge. Even Miss Rodriguez, who'd once shared friendly smiles, suddenly found herself buried in grading papers. "You should go home sick," a voice whispered behind me. I turned to see Mr. Thompson, the school security guard. At 62, with bad knees and graying hair, he wasn't much protection against boys like Marcus, but his eyes were kind and concerned. "I don't run," I said quietly. "Ain't about running," Thompson replied. "It's about living to fight another day. Marcus got something planned. Don't know what, but the kids are talking." He leaned in closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "His daddy's got the school board in his pocket. His cousin's a detective. Last teacher who crossed Marcus ended up getting arrested, drugs planted in her car. She's doing 3 to 5 upstate now." I swallowed hard, forcing down the familiar metallic taste of fear rising in my throat. "I appreciate the warning, Mr. Thompson, but I'm not going anywhere." He studied me for a long moment, then simply nodded. "Then don't go anywhere alone." As the lunch bell rang, I sat in my classroom reviewing lesson plans, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying worst-case scenarios like film reels behind my eyes. I had learned 2 critical rules of self-defense. Avoid the fight whenever possible. End it quickly if you cannot. I didn't know yet which rule I would need to invoke. But I knew one thing with certainty. I would not be their victim, not again. By the start of my 3rd week at Jefferson High, the harassment had evolved from scattered incidents into a coordinated campaign, one carefully designed to wear me down, to make me question whether I belonged here at all. It was never random. Every act was deliberate. Every slight was a message. The slashed tires were first. I discovered them after my evening lesson prep on a Thursday. All 4 tires flattened, with thin knife gashes that spoke of precision rather than vandalism. The cameras in the faculty lot, I was told, malfunctioned that afternoon, a stroke of bad luck or convenient blindness. I filed another report. The security officer on duty shrugged. "Probably kids from the neighborhood," he offered, as though that explanation should ease my mind. But I already knew whose message it was. The next day, crude messages appeared on my whiteboard. Before first period, vulgar drawings, my name paired with slurs, insults that reduced me to body parts. The janitors would quietly wipe them clean before most students arrived, but I always got there early enough to see them first. Like clockwork. I reported each instance to Principal Washington, who received me with the same exhausted patience every time. "I understand your frustration, Miss Matthews," he said, rubbing his temples, his desk drowning beneath stacks of untouched paperwork. "But kids push boundaries. We've all dealt with it." "This isn't boundary pushing, sir," I said, my voice cold but contained. "This is targeted harassment." He offered a sigh that had become his signature response. "I've worked here 20 years. Believe me, this is nothing new. If you escalate things unnecessarily, you'll only make yourself a target." The bitter irony made my stomach turn. "I'm already their target, sir. You just don't want to see it." The physical intimidation followed soon after. In the hallways, the boys began accidentally brushing up against me as they passed, fingers grazing my arm, my back, the curve of my hip lingering just long enough to establish dominance while pretending plausible deniability. The first time it happened, my breath caught involuntarily. The sensation of unwanted hands triggered old, buried reflexes, my mind flashing back to Brandon's grip, his voice in my ear. "No one will believe you, Claire. I'm the cop. You're the hysterical girlfriend." I blinked those memories away. This isn't him. This is new. I know how to handle this. Still, my fingers would subconsciously drift to my purse with every touch, reassured by the small black device resting inside my taser. What made it worse, more dangerous than any physical threat, was the way everyone else responded. They didn't. The other teachers averted their eyes. The counselors busied themselves with paperwork. Even Miss Rodriguez, who once offered me warm smiles and cafeteria small talk, now avoided sitting near me in the teacher's lounge. I was radioactive, an accident waiting to happen. No one wanted to be caught in the blast radius if things exploded, and everyone knew they eventually would. By the second week, even the students had begun treating me differently. The girls still offered shy smiles and furtive glances of solidarity. They recognized what was happening perhaps more than I did at first. The boys, on the other hand, watched me with something else in their eyes: calculation, curiosity, and the unspoken thrill of watching someone slowly drown. And Marcus King watched me most of all. Each morning, he lingered near my classroom door, hovering at the periphery, making no secret of his presence. His eyes locked on mine with unsettling steadiness, as if daring me to acknowledge him, to break first. His crew, Diego and Jamal, flanked him like loyal shadows, wordless sentinels standing guard as Marcus exerted his power without needing to speak. But power is never truly silent. Even without words, his message was deafening. "You can't touch me, but I can touch everything in your world." One afternoon, as I sat in the faculty lounge forcing myself to swallow a dry turkey sandwich, Mr. Thompson approached again. The old security guard's voice lowered to a near whisper. "Miss Matthews," he said, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard, "I know you're trying to be strong, but Marcus is planning something." I paused mid-bite, my stomach twisted. "What kind of something?" I asked. His mouth thinned into a grim line. "The kids are talking. He wants to teach you a lesson. Not just little stuff, neither. Big." I forced myself to remain calm, though my pulse had quickened. "Thank you for telling me, Mr. Thompson. But I don't run." His eyes softened, laced with the compassion of someone who had watched far too many good people get destroyed by this place. "It ain't running," he said gently. "It's surviving long enough to win. Marcus ain't just some punk kid. His daddy's got friends on the school board. His cousin's a detective downtown. Last teacher who crossed him, they found heroin in her glove compartment. She's upstate now, 3 to 5. The sandwich in my mouth turned to dust, but I forced myself to swallow it. "Be careful," he finished, "and don't go anywhere alone." By now, my hypervigilance had become second nature. I mapped every hallway, every exit, every blind corner of Jefferson High in my mind like tactical terrain. I memorized sightlines, calculated distances, rehearsed scenarios. I had learned to do this long before Marcus King ever entered my life. My Krav Maga instructor used to say, "The best defense isn't strength, it's preparation." He was right. The tension escalated again during third period on a Thursday. We were mid-discussion on narrative structure, irony, perspective, unreliable narrators when I noticed movement beyond the classroom window. Marcus was there, standing brazenly outside, watching me like a lion sizing up its prey. Diego and Jamal stood at his shoulders like stone statues. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't pretending. He wanted me to see him. Destiny Williams, one of my most perceptive students, raised her hand mid-lecture. Her brow furrowed, voice soft. "Miss Matthews, are you okay?" I smiled thinly. "I'm fine, Destiny." My voice barely wavered. Now, who can give me an example of dramatic irony from the text? But inside, every muscle in my body was coiled. The predator had moved closer. The hunt was beginning. The whispers among students grew louder that day, even more insidious than before. "It's gonna happen today. She's done for. Marcus is gonna show her what's up." Even the teachers, the ones who had long ago resigned themselves to this school's code of silence, kept their distance. They knew what it meant to be a marked woman in Jefferson High. That evening, as I locked my classroom door, I sensed the shift in the air, that eerie calm before a hurricane makes landfall. The building seemed too quiet. The shadows stretched longer. Even the normally bustling hallways emptied faster than usual. Students whispered in corners, casting glances my way. The setup was nearly complete. I felt it in my bones. But I refused to retreat. The hallway outside the English department was unnaturally still. Normally, between periods, Jefferson High's corridors hummed with noise, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, laughter bouncing off the institutional gray walls. But today, as I stepped into that narrow stretch toward the copy room, the usual chaos had been replaced by an oppressive quiet. The few students who lingered weren't in any hurry to get to class. They stood in small, scattered groups along the edges of the hall, pretending to scroll on their phones, but their eyes followed me. Waiting. Watching. This is the moment. My breathing slowed. My heartbeat didn't. As I rounded the corner near the old, broken water fountain, Marcus appeared as if materializing from the shadows. Diego and Jamal flanked him, blocking the passage like sentries sealing off my escape. Marcus wore his usual self-assured smirk, his posture relaxed but predatory, a lion stretching before the pounce. His voice was silk over steel. "Miss Matthews," he drawled. "We need to talk about my grade." I kept walking, my grip tightening on my leather purse strap. My voice was steady, controlled. "Office hours are Tuesdays and Thursdays, Marcus. Make an appointment." I tried to step past him, but Diego shifted sideways, blocking my path fully. Jamal moved behind me, closing the triangle. Their trap was complete. My muscles tensed beneath my professional armor. "See, that's your problem," Marcus continued, his tone turning colder. "You think the rules apply here, that your fancy little degree means something in my hallways." His words slithered into my ears like venom. "These aren't your hallways," I replied, my voice thinner now, but still holding. "And you're about 5 seconds away from a suspension that even your daddy's money won't fix." Marcus laughed, a sharp, brittle sound that echoed too loudly off the cinderblock walls. "You going to suspend me for what? Having a friendly conversation?" His eyes gleamed. "But you're not recording, Miss Matthews." "They are." That's when I noticed the phones. A dozen students had materialized along the corridor, cameras raised, already filming. It wasn't just intimidation, it was spectacle, a performance, a public humiliation in the making. They wanted an audience. They wanted evidence. But Marcus hadn't accounted for one thing. I came prepared too. I moved again, trying to slip around Diego, but Marcus's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist with crushing force. His fingers dug into my skin, awakening memories I had fought hard to bury. Memories of Brandon's grip, of control, of helplessness. "Not this time." "Let go," I commanded, each word carved from stone. Marcus leaned closer, twisting my wrist just enough to hurt. His breath reeked of arrogance. "Or what? You gonna scream? Nobody cares. Nobody's coming to save you." That's when his free hand reached for my skirt. It happened in a blink. The sharp rip of fabric tearing echoed through the narrow corridor like a gunshot. My pencil skirt split at the seam as his hand yanked it violently, exposing my thigh beneath. Gasps rippled through the gathered students. Some laughed nervously, a few lowered their phones, but most kept filming. Marcus grinned wider. He thought he'd won. He had no idea. Years of Krav Maga training took over. I didn't think. I moved. My free hand shot upward in a textbook palm strike, snapping Marcus's head back violently. His grip on my wrist broke instantly as he staggered back, his expression twisting from smugness to stunned rage. My purse slipped from my shoulder during the scuffle, its contents spilling across the dirty linoleum floor. Lipstick, pens, my phone, and one small black object that skidded partially under the lockers. The taser. The energy in the hallway shifted instantly. "She's got a weapon," someone shouted. The students' phones kept recording, but now the tone had changed. This wasn't the video Marcus had planned to circulate. This was no longer his show. Marcus recovered faster than I anticipated, lunging toward me as I dove for the taser. Diego reached for my arms from behind, but I pivoted sharply, driving my elbow into his solar plexus. He crumpled forward, wheezing. Jamal tried to grab me next and met my knee squarely in his groin. His legs buckled, his body collapsing to the floor with a whimper. In one fluid motion, my hand wrapped around the taser's grip. Safety off. Light-armed. The world narrowed into focus. "Back off!" I shouted, the taser raised, crackling softly. The command cracked like a gunshot through the hallway. For the first time, Marcus King hesitated. The predator blinked. The hunter had become the prey. Diego gasped on the floor. Jamal whimpered against the lockers. Marcus stood frozen, not out of submission, but calculation. His eyes darted between me, the taser, and the dozens of phones still recording. "This crazy bee, Titch, pulled a weapon on us," he yelled suddenly, trying to spin the story for the cameras. "We were just talking and she attacked us." I didn't flinch. "Is that what happened?" I said calmly, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Because I'm fairly certain all these cameras caught you grabbing me first, caught you tearing my skirt, caught you attempting to sexually assault a teacher on school property." His jaw clenched. The phones kept filming. The narrative was no longer his to control. Within seconds, other students appeared from every corner, drawn by the commotion. Teachers finally pushed through the crowd. I spotted Principal Washington's familiar bald head bobbing toward us, his face twisted into barely controlled panic. "What in God's name is going on here?" he barked. I didn't lower the taser. "Sexual assault," I stated. "Marcus King attacked me, tore my clothing, and attempted further assault before I defended myself." Washington's face drained of color. Let's all calm down." "No," I cut him off sharply. "We are done calming down. We are done pretending. We are done protecting predators because their families donate to the school board." I turned to Marcus, whose composure was rapidly deteriorating. "You wanted to teach me a lesson about power?" I said, my voice firm and loud for the growing crowd. "Congratulations. Class is in session." Chows erupted. Security flooded the hallway. Real police were called. Students whispered. Phones buzzed. Videos uploaded in real time. Number Jefferson assault began trending before the first patrol car even pulled into the parking lot. The war Marcus started was over. The revolution had just begun. The hours following Marcus's arrest blurred into a surreal whirlwind. Statements were taken. Phones were confiscated as evidence. Officers scoured every angle of the countless student videos, their expressions growing darker with each replay. Marcus tried desperately to spin his version, claiming I'd harassed him, provoked him, used unnecessary force, but teenage arrogance had blinded him to the reality of modern surveillance. Multiple students had filmed from different angles, creating an unbroken record of his aggression, his hands gripping my skirt, the precise moment my training took over. Within 20 minutes, Marcus King Sr. arrived, storming into the front office like a storm in an expensive suit, his voice a toxic blend of entitlement and fury as he threatened legal action against the police, the school, and even me personally. But Officer Martinez, unmoved by threats, stood firm. Marcus was being charged with assault and, based on the clear evidence, likely sexual assault as well. King Sr. tried to pivot, accusing me of bringing an illegal weapon onto school grounds. That's when I calmly presented my concealed carry permit for the taser, bluffing though the permit technically didn't exist, with the confidence trauma survivors learned to wield like armor. The principal's face shifted from fear to dread as I produced a thick file from my bag, copies of every harassment report I'd submitted, every incident Washington had minimized or ignored. The dates stretched back over weeks: slashed tires, obscene graffiti, physical intimidation, all cataloged and documented, each piece adding fuel to the growing legal inferno. And then Destiny Williams stepped forward, her young voice clear, strong, and unshakable. "Actually, sir, she can prove it all. We've been recording Marcus for 2 years." In that moment, everything shifted. One by one, other girls emerged from the growing crowd, their phones held high, their faces tight with quiet rage and long-suppressed pain. Dozens of videos were handed over: hallway gropings, verbal threats, Marcus cornering girls in empty classrooms, forcing them against lockers. They had been collecting evidence quietly, each victim afraid that speaking out alone would bring only more retaliation. But together, they had built an ironclad case that could no longer be ignored. Mr. Washington's face turned ashen as Officer Martinez announced that this investigation was no longer about one isolated incident, it was about a systemic failure of leadership, one that enabled Marcus's reign of terror. Parents were notified, media outlets descended, social media exploded. Number Jefferson assault became number teacher fights back, then number Jefferson justice, spreading nationwide. But even as the world took notice, the reality of what these girls had endured for years began to settle heavily on me. That night, long after the police cars left and the hallways emptied, Destiny and a small group of girls arrived at my apartment carrying Chinese food, offering companionship in the hollow aftermath of battle. We ate quietly at first, but slowly the stories poured out, stories of Marcus's escalating predation, of teachers who turned a blind eye, of administrators who punished victims while shielding the perpetrator. 40 girls, Destiny estimated, probably more. Some transferred, some dropped out entirely, some simply suffered in silence. The betrayal from adults meant to protect them was the deepest wound of all. The girls revealed how they had organized in secret, each keeping hidden phone folders labeled innocuous things like math homework or recipe ideas. But inside were months of evidence, screenshots, audio recordings, and videos that mapped Marcus's pattern of abuse with surgical precision. As I listened, my heartbreak hardened into purpose. We would not let these stories fade into the background noise of another school scandal. That night, my apartment transformed into a war room. Laptops covered every surface, phones charging in every outlet, as I helped them build a comprehensive digital case. Timelines, impact statements, cross-referenced accounts, the foundation for a prosecution neither the school board nor Marcus King's powerful father could bury. During a quiet moment, Destiny asked the question they had all been circling. "You've done this before, haven't you? Fought back against someone like him?" I didn't flinch. "Yes," I said simply. "My ex-boyfriend. A cop. It took years to get free, and longer to feel safe again. The training, the taser, they're not paranoia. They're my armor." The girls exchanged glances, recognizing the battle scars in my voice, as survivors do when they spot one of their own. And then another girl, Aisha, whispered, "Is that why you came to Jefferson? To help girls like us?" I paused, searching for honesty inside myself. I came to Jefferson thinking I could heal by teaching. I didn't expect any of this. But maybe this fight is exactly why I'm here. That night, as the city outside my apartment hummed with sirens and distant news reports, I saw it clearly for the first time. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. The school board meeting was scheduled for 6 p.m., but by 5:30, the building was already overflowing. The line of protesters, news vans, and concerned parents wrapping around the district office like a coiled serpent, hungry for accountability. Inside the packed auditorium, the board members sat like judges at a tribunal, their faces tight with discomfort under the harsh fluorescent lights, each of them fully aware that the entire city, perhaps the entire country, was watching. Principal Washington sat off to the side, sweat soaking through his shirt, while Marcus King Sr. occupied the opposite end, flanked by his high-powered attorneys, their polished suits gleaming beneath the cameras. I entered not alone, but surrounded by my students, Destiny, Kesha, Aisha, Maria, and dozens of others who had refused to stay silent. "We've got your back, Miss Matthews," they whispered as I passed through the sea of supporters, their presence a physical wall of solidarity that steadied my breath. The board president, Dr. Foster, called the meeting to order with a gavel that trembled in his hand, trying to project authority into a room already lost to public outrage. "We are here to address the incident," he began, but a voice from the back shouted, "You mean the sexual assault you covered up for years?" The room erupted, parents screaming, students crying, media recording every second of the chaos. Foster banged the gavel again, his voice cracking, but the truth could no longer be contained. I stood slowly, every step toward the podium heavy with the weight of 43 stories, 43 girls who had been ignored, silenced, shamed. "My name is Claire Matthews," I began, my voice carrying over the restless crowd. "And I have been a teacher at Jefferson High for 17 days. In that time I have been harassed, threatened, and assaulted, while reporting every incident through the proper channels, reports that were ignored, dismissed, or covered up by this administration. I laid the thick file onto the podium, pages of printed reports, emails, and incident logs slamming against the wood like a gavel of my own. 43 victims, so far. 43 girls whose safety was sacrificed to protect Marcus King and preserve the reputation of this institution. King Sr. rose to object, but his lawyer pulled him down, whispering furiously. "You want to talk about excessive force?" I continued, my voice rising with the steady burn of controlled rage. "Let's discuss the force used to silence victims. Let's discuss the force used to protect abusers with connections and money while girls were left to suffer." I connected my phone to the projector, my fingers steady as I cued the first video. "Fair warning," I said coldly. "This will be graphic. This is your reality." One by one, the videos played Marcus grabbing girls in the halls, pinning them against lockers, laughing as his victims tried to push him away. The timestamps marked years of abuse escalating while adults in this very room did nothing. Parents gasped, some screaming. Reporters furiously scribbled notes. Several board members stared at the floor, unable to meet the eyes of the girls sitting directly in front of them. King Sr. shouted, "These videos are taken out of context. My son's reputation." But I cut him off sharply, my voice like steel. "What context justifies putting your hands up a 14-year-old's skirt?" The auditorium exploded in uproar, and through it all I stood firm, a lighthouse in a storm. Officer Martinez stepped forward then, carrying an evidence folder thick with documents. "This is no longer a matter for the school board alone," he announced. "Based on the overwhelming evidence, this investigation is being expanded to include criminal negligence, failure to report known abuse, and systemic cover-up." He turned directly to Washington, whose face had turned ghostly pale. "Sir, I need you to come with me for questioning." Washington's breath hitched audibly as two officers approached. King Sr. leapt up again, shouting threats at law enforcement, but Martinez's voice remained calm. "Your son is being charged with 43 counts of assault and sexual misconduct. Your interference will only add obstruction charges." The board dissolved into a frenzy of panic members huddling with their lawyers, parents screaming for justice, cameras flashing like lightning. And through it all, I felt a strange calm settle over me, a quiet peace that had eluded me for years. We had broken the silence. We had shattered the system that protected predators while punishing victims. As the officers led Washington away and King Sr. was ushered from the chamber, Destiny slipped her hand into mine and whispered, "Miss Matthews, what happens now?" I squeezed her hand, my voice soft but certain. "Now? This is where change begins." The weeks that followed unfolded like an unstoppable wave, crashing over Jefferson High's old foundations and sweeping away the rotting structures that had allowed Marcus and his enablers to thrive for so long. Marcus King was expelled, and, given the weight of the evidence, charged as an adult on 43 counts of sexual assault, battery, harassment, and intimidation, while his father's legal empire frantically scrambled to minimize the fallout but found little room to maneuver as the truth had spread far beyond their reach. 3 other students implicated through the growing web of video evidence and victim testimony were also arrested, their long histories of intimidation and abuse no longer hidden behind the school's failing discipline files. Principal Washington was placed on administrative leave, pending criminal charges for his systemic negligence, while 2 board members, their own silent complicity exposed, resigned in disgrace to avoid public trials. The media storm only intensified as national networks, education advocates, and survivor rights groups amplified Jefferson High into a symbol of what happens when survivors refuse to be silenced. Suddenly, my name and face appeared across headlines, but though I had become a symbol, I never intended to be a celebrity. The school district, desperate to save face and federal funding, offered me everything: a raise, a promotion, even a transfer to any school I chose, but I had conditions of my own, terms forged from everything these girls had taught me, and everything the system had failed to provide them. Mandatory self-defense classes for all students, comprehensive sex education that included detailed consent training, anonymous reporting systems that bypassed local administrators entirely, third-party oversight for harassment complaints, and most of all, a zero-tolerance policy that would finally mean zero tolerance, no exceptions for last names or family donations. The district agreed they had no choice, and slowly, Jefferson High began its transformation. The building still looked the same. The gray lockers, the cracked tiles, the institutional cinderblock walls, but the air inside those hallways changed. Girls walked taller, their shoulders back and heads high, no longer shrinking into shadows. Boys who had once strutted with impunity moved carefully now, aware that consequences finally existed. Teachers who had previously kept their heads down found new courage, emboldened by the revolution that had erupted from within their own classrooms. On my first morning back, Mr. Thompson greeted me at the doors with a wide grin. "Welcome home, Miss Matthews," he said, and for the first time, the word didn't sit heavy in my chest. It fit. This place, once drenched in fear, was becoming something else entirely. My first class of the semester was more crowded than usual. Many students had requested schedule changes to sit in my room, not because I was some viral sensation, but because they saw me as proof that even the most broken systems could be fought and repaired. Before I began the lesson, I addressed the room. "I know you all have questions about what happened," I said gently, "and you deserve answers. But the most important thing you need to understand is this. What I did, how I fought back, was my choice in my situation. Violence is never the first option. Speaking up is always the first. Telling your truth, demanding help, refusing silence, that's where real power starts." A hand rose. Tyler, one of Marcus's former friends who had never laid hands on anyone but had spent years looking the other way. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "Miss Matthews, I just want to say I'm sorry for not speaking up before, for being part of the problem, even if I never touched anyone myself." I studied him for a long moment, seeing not just guilt but the seed of genuine accountability. "Thank you, Tyler. That takes courage. But apologizing is only the first step. What matters now is what you do next. Will you speak up when you see it happen again? Will you step between the predator and the victim, even if it costs you something?" He nodded, swallowing hard. "We started a group, some of us guys Brothers Against Violence. We're working with the counselors now, trying to figure out how to be better." A ripple of emotion swelled in my chest. This was real change, not just punishment, but growth. "That's how we fix this," I said. "Not just by punishing monsters, but by teaching the next generation to refuse becoming one." As I transitioned into my first lesson on narrative voice fitting, I thought, given the stories these students were finally learning to tell, I saw it clearly. This was no longer a school defined by its predators. This was a school finding its voice. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. 6 months later, I stood once again in the same auditorium where I had once faced down the school board, but now the atmosphere was transformed, humming with celebration instead of tension, filled with proud families, teachers, and students who had reclaimed Jefferson High as their own, no longer weighed down by fear or silence. The first graduation under the new policies marked the school's rebirth, and at the center of it all stood Destiny Williams, now valedictorian, her voice strong and clear as she addressed the packed audience, speaking not only for her class but for every girl who had once walked these halls afraid. "My teacher, Miss Matthews," Destiny said, her voice steady, her gaze sweeping the room, "taught me the most important lesson of my life, that we do not have to accept the unacceptable, that silence is never the answer, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is say no more and mean it." As she spoke, I scanned the crowd and saw so many of the girls who had once hunched their shoulders and kept their heads down now sitting tall, their eyes bright with pride, their futures no longer haunted by what they had survived. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but for the first time, they were not tears of fear or pain, they were tears of hope, pure and powerful. After the ceremony, as families gathered, posed for photos, and tossed caps into the air, Tyler approached me, accompanied by a young woman I didn't immediately recognize until he spoke. "Miss Matthews, this is my cousin, Tanya," he said softly. Tanya, one of Marcus's earlier victims who had transferred schools to escape. She stood before me now, blinking back tears, but with strength radiating from her voice. "Thank you," she whispered, "for doing what I couldn't, for standing when I could only run. You were strong enough to fight." I gently reached for her hands, my voice equally firm. "You were strong too, Tanya. Leaving was strength. Surviving was strength. And now you get to come back and finish what they tried to take from you." Tanya nodded, wiping her eyes. "I've enrolled for summer classes. I want to graduate from Jefferson. I want to show them they didn't win." My heart swelled. As we spoke, my phone buzzed quietly in my bag, a message from an unknown number. "Miss M, starting teaching program at State next year. You inspired me to be the kind of teacher kids can trust. Thank you for showing me it's possible. Signed, Maria." Then, another message, another former student. another life reclaimed, another ripple in the pond we had started by simply refusing to drown. Standing at the edge of the stage that evening, watching students reunite with families, I breathed in the air of a place that had once suffocated me, but now filled my lungs with something I had thought I'd lost forever: peace. Jefferson High would never be perfect, no school ever is. But the silence had been shattered, the predators exposed. And the students, my students, had learned the most powerful lesson of all, that when even one voice rises, others follow, and what once seemed unchangeable begins to crumble. I had come here seeking healing. What I found was purpose,